in the original incarnation of Game of Thrones, has finally spoken out about what happened. So we're going to go way back on this one because there are a lot of interesting facets just to the pilot. It's kind of gone down in mythical status with the fandom, wondering what happened, what was all the controversy, why did it almost destroy the show, what is this all about? So apologies, this may be a little insider baseball. Go all the way back to 2009 on this one because George actually spoke out about this. He actually posted a little bit about how he was thrilled that Tamsin was going to be chosen, and he was pretty sure she was a lock, and then apparently she walked away. Though I think we do have some evidence that she was kind of forced out, but she's never really spoken about the issue, so she's finally let us know her side of the story. Okay, so what happened? Well, this is after D&D make the deal. They're working with HBO, and they're set to do the pilot, and they have Tamsin in mind. They actually auditioned 3 people for Dany, Tamsin and 2 other people. It has never been revealed who those two other people are, but essentially Amelia was actually coming in very, very late. She was basically one of the actors they recast because there were a lot of people in the pilot who never ended up being on the show for various reasons. But Tamsin was probably one of the more controversial because she just seemingly walked away from tens of millions of dollars and worldwide fame. So you're kind of like, what happened? Well, a lot of things are going on. For one thing, the shooting that she did took place in Morocco because they wanted a kind of exotic foreign location. But essentially they ruined it because they didn't really know that much about production or film. I mean, they had done writing and they had done screenplays, but they had never done actual production. They had never done real production on a real movie set. And they basically just kind of screwed it all up. And they were basically wasted a lot of HBO's money. And they ended up not using a lot of the Morocco shooting. And there were actually a lot of incidents on the Morocco shoot. I'm not going to go through all of them, but essentially one of the horses, I'm not joking, got an erection and was sort of very excited to be on the production. And Martin was watching all this because he was there on location and he was laughing it up, saying this is getting really silly. This is essentially a love scene between Drogo and Dany. And as Merchant reveals, she was just very uncomfortable with the whole thing. She just didn't like taking off her clothes. She just wasn't motivated by the story. She just didn't think Game of Thrones was worth all the trouble she was going through. She just didn't feel right about the creative process. But Martin, from the very beginning, really thought about her as Dany for a while because he had watched The Tudors. He needed somebody who could really embody Dany in terms of her ferociousness and her strength. And he was pretty sure Tamsin was it. So, again, from George, she was supposed to be Dany. And we're not clear about what happened during the process, but apparently while they were shooting, Dan and Dave apparently just changed their mind and said, we don't think you're the right person, because Tamsin makes it seem as if it was completely voluntary. They gave her a great opportunity. She liked where they were going to go, but while they were doing the contracts, because again, she was technically under contract, and her people or her team kept advising her, you don't want to walk away from this. This is really your big shot. You really want to reconsider this because, again, even though George was well known, it was not a guaranteed hit. Again, remember, HBO didn't really do fantasy before Game of Thrones. They had done fantasy only a little bit. The closest thing you could get is Rome, right? So they had done kind of fantasy historical fiction, but never something on this scale. But nevertheless, there was a lot of good buzz that, this is an international bestseller. It has a huge fan base. Martin really knows J.R.R. Tolkien, etc., and he himself has a good history with Hollywood production. So it's sort of like it just seemed HBO was very confident despite a really bad pilot and one that really affected the first season, because you kind of wonder, like, why are the sets or sometimes the costumes off? Like, it just doesn't look right in certain places. Like, the CGI doesn't look finished. And the answer is they spent a lot of the money. They just took so much money from the pilot that kind of destroyed the first season. It could have been a lot better. I regard it, like many people, as one of the best seasons, but you can only imagine if they had a really full budget what they could have done. And George himself has complained about this, that one of the reasons they couldn't do a good death with Robert is because they just couldn't even hire the extras. Again, they just ran out of money. So Tamsin makes it seem as if it was totally up to her, and she just made a kind of hard decision saying, you know what, I just don't think the story is worth all kind of the emotional trauma I'm going to have to do to generate Dany. And she congratulates Amelia for doing the best Dany. And she just says, I don't think I could have done that. I want to follow my own path. She's actually doing her own fiction now, which is going to be published soon. And we can congratulate her. But it's a kind of skewed reporting. We just do know for a fact that Dan and Dave apparently were not impressed by her. George loved her. So it's kind of another one of those things where they clearly clashed. And again, George was mostly involved with the casting. And for the most part, they did come to an agreement. Again, most of the performers they ended up having, both sides liked them, but Merchant is kind of an interesting in-between case, and it kind of gives you a sign, even from the beginning, Dan and Dave did kind of want to move away from George and didn't always trust his decision-making, which is kind of bizarre given that they almost had no experience in production. So you're kind of like, from a technical angle, it seemed really weird that they went away from Martin's advice because he technically did way more television and film than they did at that point. So it's kind of a bizarre matching from the very beginning, but there we are. So this has been a sort of insider story on season 1 and the pilot. Again, Tamsin seems to be in a good place. She's still acting. She's doing okay. But again, want to be careful to totally believe her revisionist history about what happened with Dany in season 1 of Game of Thrones. Alright, this has been GRRM Thrones Analyzed. If you like the content, please hit the like button and or subscribe. Please comment below. That helps the channel. Thank you for listening. I'm going to put more and more stuff on Patreon. If you can, please support the channel there. Thanks again.